Okay, so get ready for this. This deep dive, it takes us into some serious reality checks. Beverly Hills, right? Land of luxury.
Mm-hmm.
But this piece you sent in, it's about a waiter, a Maggi hat.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, a lot of assumptions. And let me tell you, this story, it really takes some wild turns.
Oh, absolutely. What I think is so interesting here is how the story kind of plays with what we expect, you know?
Yeah.
Like we're set up for this like classic out-of-touch waiter thing, but then
Totally.
it totally flips the script.
So we've got Ethan, right? He's our waiter.
Yeah.
Working a busy night at this fancy, swanky place. The Arcadian table. I mean, think chandeliers, truffle oil in the air.
Oh, yeah.
The whole 9 yards. And he spots this teenager at a table wearing, yep, a Maggi hat.
Oh, boy.
And Ethan, well, he's not exactly a fan of what that hat represents.
Right.
And makes this, kind of snide comment, basically telling the kid he doesn't belong there.
And this is where this story, I think, really gets at those anxieties we all have about, like, saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, right?
Right.
Especially with social media and everything. Broadcasting everything in an instant.
Oh, it gets worse. So the manager pulls Ethan aside and drops a bomb. The teenager is Barron Trump. Dining with Senator Alden Royce.
Yeah.
Talk about a sudden shift in power dynamics, right?
Yeah.
Ethan's stomach drops. He just knows he's about to go viral for all the wrong reasons.
For sure. And this is what I find really interesting, right? Because instead of a lawsuit or some public shaming thing, which you might expect, Ethan gets an invitation to a meeting
Yeah.
with the senator and Barron.
Oh, man. Can you imagine that spent? Like, Ethan's probably sweating bullets trying to figure out what's going to happen. Is he going to lose his job? Get publicly humiliated?
Right. And the meeting itself, it's like a masterclass in turning conflict into a learning opportunity. Barron is surprisingly composed, addresses Ethan's behavior, directly, but focuses on personal accountability.
You bet that was such a wake-up call for Ethan. It's suddenly not about politics anymore, is it? It's about facing those consequences of your actions and really owning up to your biases.
Exactly. Barron's words, I think, really get to Ethan and make him see that snap judgment for what it was. Prejudice, just based on this one visible symbol.
It's powerful. It makes you think about all the hats we see every day, right? Not just literal hats. The clothes, the cars people drive, even their zip codes.
We all make assumptions based on, like, these surface observations, right? The question is, what do we do with that awareness? That's the real challenge, like Barron points out.
That's the million-dollar question. And the story shows Ethan actually taking some big steps. He goes to a workshop, like about unconscious bias, and really tries to see things from different perspectives.
It's not about being perfect, right?
Right.
It's about making the effort to be better.
It's like Barron throws down this gauntlet. How you respond to your mistakes, that defines your character.
Absolutely. And it's not just about escaping consequences, right? It's about using those moments as opportunities to grow and become a more thoughtful, empathetic person.
So we've got Ethan facing the music, realizing his mistake, and starting to, improve himself. But there's this other layer to the story that I find really fascinating.
You're talking about Barron, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's not this entitled, spoiled kid that some might expect. There's real depth to him.
Absolutely. He's calm, he's articulate, and honestly, he has this kind of quiet wisdom you wouldn't expect from someone his age.
It's interesting, right? The story actually reveals that he didn't even want to wear that MAGA hat.
Really?
Yeah, his father insisted and made it this whole thing about standing up for what you believe in, even if it makes you uncomfortable.
Wow. That adds a whole new dimension. I mean, it wasn't even Barron's choice to wear that symbol, and yet that's how Ethan saw him.
Perfectly illustrates how we can get it so wrong when we judge based on, like, these superficial cues. We just reduce people to a single label. We don't know the full story.
So Ethan's facing the consequences. Barron's demonstrating this maturity beyond his years. But what about the aftermath? Did Ethan face any like repercussions from the restaurant, besides that meeting?
Well, the story doesn't go into specifics about disciplinary action or anything like that, but it does mention that news of the incident, it was already, online, even as Ethan was meeting with the senator and Barron.
Wow. So even Senator Royce decided to not do anything legally. Ethan was still facing the court of public opinion.
Yeah, exactly. And the online reactions, as you might expect, were incredibly polarized. Some people were praising Ethan for standing up to privilege, and others were condemning him for, targeting a teenager.
Oh, man, that must have been so stressful for him, knowing that no matter what happened with Barron and the senator, his actions were already out there for everyone to judge.
Absolutely. It's a stark reminder that, in today's world, even those seemingly private moments can have very public consequences.
It's fascinating, though, how the story shifts at this point, right?
Right.
Instead of focusing on, like, the damage to Ethan's reputation or the restaurant's image, it goes into Ethan's, like, internal journey.
It becomes less about external repercussions and more about, like, personal growth and accountability,
Yeah.
right? It's about how Ethan chooses to respond to this new awareness.
Yeah. Does he just, like, try to brush it off, pretend it never happened, or does he actually try to change?
Well, he actually takes some pretty significant steps. He signs up for this community workshop all about unconscious bias. It shows a genuine commitment to understanding his actions and doing better.
That's encouraging. I mean, it would have been easy for him to get defensive or just dismiss the whole thing, but he actually confronts his own, shortcomings.
Yeah, and it doesn't frame this as a quick fix or anything. It emphasizes that, like, unlearning these biases.
Mm-hmm.
It's a long process. It's challenging,
Right.
but ultimately it's worthwhile.
It sounds like Ethan really took Barron's words to heart, especially that part about how your actions moving forward.
Yeah.
That's what reveals your character.
Absolutely. It's not just about those empty apologies. It's about actually backing up your words with tangible change. And that's what Ethan does. He seeks out new perspectives. He challenges his own preconceived notions.
So did this whole experience actually change him? Did he become, less judgmental?
Well, the story jumps ahead a few months.
Yeah.
And we find Ethan back at the Arcadian table. And he's serving a table, but he's got this newfound awareness.
Okay, so he didn't lose his job.
No.
That's good.
And what's interesting is that the story emphasizes this subtle but really profound shift in his perspective.
Mm.
He doesn't see people through this lens of, assumptions and symbols anymore.
Yeah.
He sees them as individuals, each with their own unique story.
That's a remarkable transformation. It's like he's finally learned to see past those superficial details, right?
Yeah.
And appreciate the complexity of the people around him.
Exactly. And it's not presented as this, like, grand revelation, but more as this quiet internal change that kind of ripples outward and affects how he interacts with the world.
It's a beautiful illustration of how a negative experience can lead to such profound personal growth.
It reminds us that we all have biases, and acknowledging them is the first step to being more understanding and compassionate.
This story is packed with insightful observations about, assumptions and second chances, and really the power of choosing to be better.
It challenges us to look at our own biases and think about how we can move forward with more awareness and empathy.
All right, so we've covered Ethan's journey from that initial, disastrous encounter to his efforts at, self-improvement. But there's one character we haven't really explored in detail.
Yeah.
Barron Trump himself.
Yeah, that's a great point. Barron, I think, is portrayed in this story in a way that completely flips what a lot of people might expect.
Totally. He's not the stereotypical, privileged kid having a tantrum.
Right, yeah.
He's calm, composed, and honestly, he's surprisingly insightful.
Exactly. And the story gives us these glimpses into the challenges he faces, living under this constant, public scrutiny, and being judged based on his family's political stance.
I mean, the story mentions he didn't even want to wear that MAGA hat.
Right.
His father insisted. What do you make of that?
It reveals those pressures he faces, even within his own family, right? There's this expectation that he has to represent this certain ideology, even if it makes him uncomfortable.
It's a powerful reminder that even those who seem to have it all,
Yeah,
they can still face real struggles.
absolutely. It makes him relatable. It reminds us that he's not just like this symbol of wealth or privilege.
Mm-hmm.
He's a young person trying to figure out his own identity and beliefs in this very public and often unforgiving world.
Which makes his response to Ethan all the more remarkable. I mean, he could have lashed out, dismissed him, but instead he's thoughtful, he's surprisingly mature.
Absolutely. He turns it into this teachable moment, not just for Ethan, but for us too.
That's what makes this story so compelling. It's not just a waiter making a mistake. It's about how we see each other, how we judge each other, and this potential for growth, for understanding that exists in the most unexpected places.
Right. It reminds us that everyone has a story, and taking the time to listen can lead to these profound insights and connections.
Okay, we've talked about Ethan's journey and Barron's perspective, but what about Senator Royce? What role does he play in all of this?
He's interesting. He acts as this mediating force. He orchestrates the meeting, right,
Mm-hmm.
between Ethan and Barron. He wants a face-to-face resolution. He doesn't want to resort to, like, legal action or public shaming.
That's a really interesting choice. I mean, it would have been easier to just protect Barron, maybe even use his influence to punish Ethan.
Right.
But he takes this different approach.
He gets the value of dialogue and personal accountability. He wants Ethan to learn, but he also wants to create space for understanding.
It's almost like he's this wise mentor, guiding both Ethan and Barron through this really delicate situation.
Yeah. He gives a perspective that kind of goes beyond the immediate conflict. He reminds Ethan that recognizing bias is the first step to positive change, and how important it is to look past those surface-level differences.
Yeah. His presence really adds a layer of nuance. It suggests that even those in positions of power can choose compassion and understanding over retribution.
Absolutely. His actions really highlight this possibility of bridging divides and finding common ground, you know, even in a world that feels increasingly polarized.
Let's go back to that tense moment at the Arcadian table right after Ethan makes his comment. What details stand out to you?
There's a line that I think perfectly captures that shift in energy in the room. The silence they left behind was deafening.
Ooh.
It just speaks volumes about the weight of the situation, those unspoken consequences.
Yeah, it's like everyone in that restaurant instantly knows what just happened, right? They know it's not just a waiter being rude, it's something bigger, about to explode.
And the story also shows how quickly things escalate now with social media. A diner at the next table even warns Ethan that his actions will be all over the internet the next morning.
Wow. So even before the manager comes over, Ethan's already facing this potential viral judgment.
Exactly. Yeah, it's this stark reminder, right? We live in a world where every action can be documented and scrutinized, and the consequences can be really, really swift and far-reaching.
It adds this whole other level of tension to the story. Ethan's not just worried about his job or legal stuff. He's terrified of the online mob.
And the story doesn't shy away from that potential damage. It mentions how online comments were already so polarized, with some calling him a hero and others accusing him of bullying.
It's crazy how easily people can be, categorized and judged based on these tiny bits of information or events that are taken out of context.
It shows the danger of those snap judgments, right? And the need for critical thinking in this world where there's just so much information all the time.
Okay, so we had this tense scene at the restaurant, and then it jumps to the next morning. Ethan is waiting for this meeting with Senator Royce and Barron. What's going through his mind at that point?
The story describes him as filled with dread, like rehearsing apologies, but they all sound inadequate. He's really grappling with this weight of his mistake and the uncertainty of what's to come.
It's that feeling of knowing you messed up big time and having to face the consequences, but not knowing what they'll be.
Exactly. And the story emphasizes the power dynamics at play. You have this waiter facing a powerful senator and the son of a former president. He doesn't have control of the situation.
Yeah, it's like he's standing before a judge waiting for his sentence.
And the story makes us think about our own assumptions, too. Like, how would WE react in this similar situation?
It reminds us that we're all capable of making mistakes, and how we handle those mistakes can have such a huge impact, not just on ourselves, but on the people around us.
And the story doesn't pretend that Ethan's actions were okay, but it also offers this glimmer of hope that redemption is possible, through remorse and this commitment to change.
So the big moment arrives. Senator Royce and Barron Trump walk in. How does the story describe that?
Well, it focuses on Barron's composure, the way he carries himself with this quiet strength. Despite everything, he's not, throwing a tantrum. He's in control of his emotions.
It's like the story is purposefully going against our expectations. You might think he'd be angry, entitled, but we get this calm, measured response.
And it's not just how he acts, it's what he says. He addresses Ethan's behavior directly, but focuses on personal accountability rather than blame.
What does he say that really highlights that?
He says to Ethan, "You're not the first person to make a comment like that, and you won't be the last. People see the hat and they think they know everything about me. They don't see me."
Wow. That is incredibly insightful, especially from a teenager. He's calling out that human tendency to judge based on appearances rather than taking the time to understand the individual.
Exactly. And it's a challenge to all of us. It reminds us that we all wear these hats, right? Metaphorically speaking. These labels that others use to define us without knowing who we really are.
That's such a powerful way to put it. It's this call to look beyond those surface level things and see the person, not the label.
Yeah, and it reminds us that even someone like Barron Trump, who seems to have it all,
Right.
can still be judged and misunderstood based on things he can't control.
This conversation between Ethan, Barron, and the senator, it feels so pivotal. This is where Ethan starts to really grapple with what he did.
Totally. And it's interesting how the senator doesn't take over the conversation. He lets Barron lead and articulate his own perspective.
It creates this balance, this sense of fairness.
That's
Both
right.
sides are heard.
And it reinforces the message that even in these situations where there's conflict, dialogue and empathy can lead to better resolutions than blame or punishment.
Okay, so we have this exchange happening, but the story keeps going. And Barron says something, this final remark, that sticks with Ethan. What does he say?
He tells Ethan, "You're going to have to live with this mistake, but how you move forward will show what kind of person you really are. Just don't let it stop at words."
Whoa, there's a lot there. It's acknowledging that actions have consequences, but it's also emphasizing this power of choice, in shaping who we become.
Right. It's a challenge to Ethan to turn his remorse into actual change, to prove that he's learned.
It's like Barron is giving him another chance, but it's not a free pass, is it?
No.
Ethan has to earn it.
Exactly. And it shows that redemption isn't just about escaping punishment. It's about this internal transformation.
And it's clear Ethan takes it to heart.
He really does. The story ends with him actively seeking opportunities to grow. He signs up for that workshop on unconscious bias and makes a conscious effort to engage with people from different backgrounds with different perspectives.
That's a real testament to that transformative power of facing our mistakes and choosing to learn from them. It's about taking that failure and turning it into something, that helps you grow.
It's a reminder that we all have the ability to evolve and become better even after we've messed up. The key is to be open to the lessons and to embrace the journey of becoming better.
This story is like an onion, layers upon layers of meaning, assumptions, forgiveness, second chances, and this struggle to become more aware, more compassionate people.
Yeah, it's a story that resonates because it really gets at the human condition, our ability to make mistakes, but also to grow. It reminds us that we're all works in progress and we're constantly evolving, constantly learning.
It's a story that stays with you, makes you think, and challenges you to examine your own biases and how you interact with the world.
It's a powerful reminder that even in a world that feels so divided, so judgmental, there's always room for empathy, understanding, and that potential for change. It's fascinating how the story uses the setting, right? Like this upscale Beverly Hills restaurant to amplify that tension and explore those themes of class and perception.
Right. The Arcadian table itself almost becomes a character,
Absolutely.
It represents this world of privilege and exclusivity, this place where appearances are everything.
And Ethan, as a waiter, is navigating that world from a position of service, right?
Yeah.
He's so aware of the power dynamics, how people are judged based on their clothes, their demeanor, their social standing.
It's like he's watching this intricate social dance and then makes a misstep that throws everything off.
Yeah.
His comment about the MAGA hat isn't just rude, it's like violating the unspoken rules of that whole environment.
Exactly. And it triggers this chain reaction that exposes how fragile those social constructs are and the consequences of underestimating people.
The story really captures those anxieties we have today too, right? About our social and political climate.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't think this would have played out the same way even a few years ago.
No way. The MAGA hat, it just instantly adds this layer of political tension. It's not just about a specific ideology anymore. It becomes this symbol of how divided we are as a society.
And Ethan's reaction, even if it's misguided, shows the frustration and anger that so many people feel.
Right. It's like we're all carrying around these really complex emotional responses to what's happening in the world. And sometimes those emotions can cloud our judgment and we do things we regret.
This whole thing with the online backlash is a perfect example. People are so quick to judge, to take sides, without knowing the full story.
It's the echo chamber effect.
Yeah.
You're constantly getting information that reinforces what you already believe. And it's hard to have real conversations to consider other perspectives.
So you have Ethan trying to make things right, struggling with his own biases, and then you have this online mob forming, ready to condemn him without a second thought. It's like a microcosm of what's happening everywhere.
It reminds us that we need to be more mindful, right?
Yeah.
Of the information we're consuming, the judgments we're making, and how we contribute to that online world.
Okay, so the story touches on some really, really heavy stuff here. Political division, social media, class dynamics.
Yeah.
But at its core, it's still a very human story about growth, redemption, second chances.
That's what makes it so powerful, I think. It's not just this simple good versus evil thing. It explores human fallibility And that potential we all have to change.
And the fact that Barron, the one who was wronged, is the one who offers Ethan that chance at redemption. That's huge.
It speaks to his character, his ability to rise above it all and see the bigger picture.
Instead of revenge, he chooses compassion and understanding.
And that's so important because forgiveness and empathy can be so much more transformative than punishment.
It's kind of amazing, isn't it? How a story about a waiter insulting a teenager with a MAGA J hat can lead to these profound reflections on human nature and how we navigate this world.
That's the power of stories, though, right? We can explore these difficult issues, challenge our assumptions, and connect with characters and experiences that we might not otherwise.
We've talked about Ethan's journey and the bigger picture, but I want to go back to Barron for a second. The story gives us these glimpses into his life, his struggles.
What stood out to you?
Well, he's just so self-aware. It's kind of surprising for his age. He understands the weight of his last name, the expectations, the assumptions.
And he knows about power dynamics, even within his own family. The fact that he didn't want to wear that hat, but his father insisted, says a lot.
It's that reminder that even those who seem to have it all, they can still be controlled by forces outside themselves.
It makes him human, relatable. He's not just a symbol, he's a young person figuring things out. His own identity, his beliefs, in this really challenging context.
And the story doesn't shy away from how emotionally difficult that must be for him.
Remember that line where he says, sometimes the hardest part is realizing that no matter how much you want to fix it, some people will still only see the mistake.
Yeah.
It's deep, especially coming from someone so young.
He's already learned that forgiveness and understanding have their limits, and that our past can define us even after we've changed.
It adds this kind of sadness to his character, almost a sense of resignation.
But he still chooses to show Ethan grace. He could have easily dismissed him, but instead, he engages, he challenges him, and he offers him a way to redeem himself.
It shows his maturity, his empathy, and his belief that people can grow.
There's real wisdom there, a depth of understanding you wouldn't expect.
It's what makes this story so thought-provoking. We have to reconsider what we think about people, especially those we might judge based on their background or politics.
Everyone has a story, and sometimes the most unexpected people can teach us about compassion, forgiveness, and connection.
And we need to be aware of our own biases, those blind spots we all have, and be open to learning from people who have different views, different experiences.
This deep dive has been a whirlwind. So many insights, twists, and turns. We've looked at this story from every angle, finding all these layers of meaning that we might have missed at first.
It's been an incredible exploration. Human nature, how society works, and how stories can challenge us and help us grow.
Before we move on, I want to ask you, our listeners, something. We've been talking about the hats we wear, those labels and assumptions that stick to us. What are some of the hats you've noticed in your own life? Have people judged you based on superficial things?
And how those experiences affected how you interact with others.
It's a question that makes us think about our own biases, how we see and judge the people around us, and how we can be more open, more understanding.
Take some time to really think about this. It's at the heart of what this story is about. And it's a challenge that's so relevant in a world that feels so divided.
How will you choose to move forward? What kind of hat will you wear?
So let's shift gears a bit now. Let's talk about what happens after that meeting with Barron and the senator. We know the story focuses on Ethan's internal journey, not external consequences. But there's this subtle layer here that we should look at.
Oh, I'm interested. What did you notice?
The story doesn't come right out and say that Ethan got in trouble with the restaurant, but it hints at how powerful social media is and how it can affect things.
You're right. It mentions that people were already talking about what happened online while Ethan was meeting with Barron and Senator Royce.
Exactly. It shows how, in today's world, what you do can have consequences that go way beyond the immediate situation.
So even if the restaurant didn't punish him, he was already facing public judgment.
Exactly. And that adds this whole other dimension to his journey, right? It's not just about making things right with Barron and the senator. It's about dealing with what society thinks about what he did.
It shows how social media can shape the narrative and how challenging it is to live in a world where every mistake can be broadcast and picked apart.
And the story shows those different reactions online, too. Some supporting Ethan, some condemning him.
Right, because it's rarely black and white online, is it?
It's just this mix of opinions and perspectives. It can be so hard to find nuance or common ground.
So Ethan's situation shows the bigger challenges we all face, with instant communication and things going viral.
It's a reminder to think critically, to be empathetic, and to be responsible for what we put out there.
So Ethan has this external pressure of everyone judging him, and at the same time, he's trying to grow and become better. It's a lot to deal with.
It definitely adds layers to his character, and we can see why what he does next is so important. The story shows him looking for ways to improve himself, not just to apologize, but to really change.
That decision to go to a workshop on unconscious bias says so much about him.
He's willing to learn, to unlearn, to challenge himself.
It's not just saying sorry, it's taking action.
And the story makes it clear that this isn't a quick fix. It takes time and effort.
Ethan's story reminds us that real growth is like that. It takes dedication and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone.
Facing our biases can be hard, but becoming more aware and understanding is so worth it.
Okay, so we see him working on himself, but does the story show that it's making a difference? Does he actually change?
There's this scene a few months later. It's subtle but powerful.
I want to hear about it. What happens?
Ethan's back at the Arcadian table, serving a table. He's really attentive. A guest even compliments him on his service.
So he kept his job. That's great.
It is. But the story isn't really about that. It's about this internal shift that Ethan goes through.
What do you mean?
There's this line. He realized something had changed, not in his circumstances, but in himself. He's not seeing people as symbols or stereotypes anymore. He sees individuals.
That's what real growth is, right? It's not about how things look on the outside. It's about how you see the world.
Exactly. And it's not this big dramatic thing. It just happens gradually, inside him.
It shows that real change often happens quietly. Like these little shifts in how you think that can make a big difference in how you live your life.
Ethan's transformation is about becoming more aware and compassionate. And it's something we can all do.
Yeah, it's about challenging our biases, learning from others, and trying to see the good in everyone.
And it's a journey we can all take, no matter what we've done in the past or how much we think we know.
Ethan shows us that even when things are hard, we can choose to grow, to learn, and to become better people.
His commitment to improving himself is inspiring. It shows that we can turn mistakes into something positive.
Okay, we've covered a lot in this deep dive. We've looked at the story, the characters, the social and political side of things, and the power of changing for the better.
We've talked about judgment, bias, redemption, and seeing beyond those labels.
Before we finish this part, I want to leave you with something to think about. Remember what Barron said to Ethan. How you move forward will show what kind of person you really are. What do those words mean to you?
Think about your own life. Have you ever had to face your biases or make amends for something you did wrong?
How did you move forward? Did you try to grow and change, or did you avoid it?
Think about those experiences and how they shape you and how you see the world.
Because it's not about being perfect. It's about learning from our mistakes and becoming better, more understanding people.
It's about being the best versions of ourselves. And it's a journey that, it really never ends. We're always learning, always growing, always hopefully becoming a little bit more aware.
It's like this constant process of self-discovery, right? And this deep dive has really been an amazing example of that. We've explored so much about human nature and how stories can really challenge us and make us think.
We started with this waiter, this Meiji hat, this seemingly simple encounter, and look where it took us. To these really deep conversations about judgment and bias and the possibility of redemption.
We talked about social media and how it can shape the narrative and the complexities of forgiveness and second chances. We even got into those power dynamics that play out not just in society, but even within families.
And the pressure that comes with living under the public eye.
Yeah.
It's been a really insightful journey.
But amidst all of that complexity, there's this core idea that keeps coming up, this power of self-awareness.
Absolutely. Ethan's story is like the perfect illustration of that. That journey he goes through from that moment of prejudice to his efforts to become a better person, it all starts with recognizing his own biases.
Yeah, it's not about pretending to be perfect or saying you're free from bias. It's about admitting that we all have blind spots, that we make assumptions, and that sometimes we mess up, We say or do things that we regret later.
And it's about choosing to face those moments, to learn from them, and to try to become more understanding, more compassionate people.
Ethan going to that workshop on unconscious bias, that really shows his commitment to growth. He doesn't just shy away from the hard stuff. He actively tries to change his perspective.
And that choice right there, that's what defines us. It shapes who we are and the impact we have on the world.
This whole conversation has made me think a lot about my own hats, the assumptions I make, how I can be more mindful of how I treat others. It's a challenge to always be checking yourself, trying to see things from different angles, and remembering that everyone has a story that's so much deeper than those first impressions.
It takes work. being willing to admit when you're wrong, and choosing empathy and understanding.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with this final thought. Remember what Barron said to Ethan. How you move forward will show what kind of person you really are. Those words, they're so powerful. And not just for Ethan, but for all of us.
It's a call to action, to think about the choices we make and the kind of legacy we want to leave behind. So we ask you, how do you want to move forward? What kind of story do you want to tell?
What hat will you choose to wear? We hope this deep dive has given you some things to think about and maybe even inspired you to start your own journey of self-discovery and growth. Thanks for joining us.